Hi, it's Luna. Welcome to day 3 of Moth Eaten Reel's 31 Days of Horror 2024. Yesterday you'd have heard me forecast that today we would be discussing an erotic, sensual, kinky horror. I was wrong, apparently. Today we are talking about Clive Barker's Hellraiser 2022. So making it clear from the start, I don't have high opinions of this movie, so I'll just let you know now that I'll be comparing it a lot to the 1987 Hellraiser, which Clive Barker himself was heavily involved in, and the original 1986 novella. I don't know where to begin, but I suppose a summary is a good place to start. We start in the ominous location of Belgrade, Serbia, in the midst of an orgy, where there's then this guy who walks in, who I thought would be more main, but he's immediately tricked into opening the puzzle box by this guy. I wonder if we will ever see him again. And then we have this sex scene continuing from that, which they had such weird timing for this because, right, okay. So we're introduced to our main protagonist, Riley, and her boyfriend, and whilst they're having sex, he drops the I love you. She does not seem ready for the I love you. Apparently, it hit so badly that there's then 6 years later, is what I thought. The 6 years later, it became clear, was actually just referring to this was 6 years after the Belgrade orgy. I don't know why it put it there. It added a weirdly comical note where, as I said, I thought the I love you hit at such a bad time when she was like, what? That it just knocked them 6 years into the future. She's living with her brother and his boyfriend and another roommate whose name I never caught. And it's a precarious situation where she is a recovering drug addict and so is her boyfriend. Her brother doesn't like this, points out that she's vulnerable and also that she's missing rent again for this. And so the boyfriend convinces her to raid a warehouse with him so they can find something of value, pawn off, and she can pay rent so she can continue to live with her brother, his boyfriend, and their roommate. Here they find an item that might be familiar to those who have already experienced this franchise. It's the mysterious puzzle box in the original lament configuration. She goes back. Her brother twigs that she's been up to no good in order to pay him rent, and so they have a big old shouting match. Their neighbours must love them, and then he kicks her out. She's like, say it like you mean it! Tell me get out! So he's like, get out! And then she goes off to a play park and starts fiddling with the box. And I do have to say, I do admire the way that a lot of the scenery, they actually did do an interesting job of actually making kind of merge with the puzzle box as things are happening. She's on a roundabout which then has this interesting cuboid pattern on it that feels organic but still then thematic, and I do like that. I've got to give this movie props where I can, because it's not many. During this, she's also taken some more drugs. Her brother has instinctual sibling sixth sense to get up and go after her in the playground, where she has then figured out the puzzle box. It's got a little knife now, a little shark fin. She passes out from the drugs, presumably, but also because of spooky puzzle box happenings. He finds her, picks up the box, cuts himself, but he takes her home, and then shenanigans ensue. He seems to have been sucked away to another dimension in a sink. And from then on, the movie's mission statement seems to be as formulaic as possible. They just go through various states of figuring out what the puzzle box is and what it's doing and how to figure it out. And I do feel that there was supposed to be some kind of clear parallel to Riley's experience with drugs and addiction. Figuring out the puzzle box is now also pushing away all of her close ones. I say close ones. I'm just gonna say they're mostly her brother's friends. And none of these people particularly pop for me, is another thing that made the whole journey feel very formulaic. They really do feel not even like archetypes. You know, there's a charm to when someone is just a trope, you know, like those 90s high school movies, like you've got the nerds, the jocks, the cheerleaders, the art students, the theatre kids, and it just kind of puts you on a footing where you just know what that person's about because they're entirely a trope, and that's okay, especially in this kind of film where you kind of clock pretty early that they're all gonna die anyway. But it leads to even then the kills being formulaic with very little variation. I know apparently this is the 11th installment of the franchise overall, and importantly that it is a reboot. And at some point I think that the Cenobites made it their thing that chains and whips excite them, and a lot of the kills are done via some kind of chain. And so that's something we get a fair amount of, and I just did not find it very engaging. So the first kill that we get, well, obviously it's her brother. You know, I was so happy for him at first. He's got his boyfriend, they're in a happy, healthy gay relationship, and then they just kill him off instantly. In fairness, Clive Barker would do that. But then after that, the second one, Riley takes her boyfriend to go and investigate the person whose belongings they stole from the warehouse, because that's something that they could track quite easily, apparently. He seems reticent, and he's like, oh, I probably shouldn't be here, because I'm not exactly sure where they find her. It seems to be some kind of like medical ward. She's definitely in some kind of state where she needs a lot of medical equipment to keep her alive. And it's the woman from Belgrade at the beginning who initially tricks the boy to going into the room with the box. We have a nice bit of exposition that we get to know that the box is very dangerous. And so she tries to take the box from Riley, but in the process stabs herself. And so now the box is like, yum, 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 I have been moisturized by more blood, and it changes shape again. Riley and her boyfriend leave, and I do have to say again that I do really like how they used and manipulated the environment to then be like going through a puzzle box, and it opens up like it does in the original movie into these corridors, and we get the first closer look at the Cenobites of the movie. I want to like them so badly because I think the designs are really interesting. I think that they definitely expanded in a direction that made it really fun and stylish. We got a glimpse of one of them in the play park back when, but this scene I think is a lot clearer. And so the woman from Belgrade, she's just going to be called Belgrade Lady because I don't know her name either. You know, there's a lot of horror movies where, again, as soon as you know that a lot of people are going to die, you really don't catch their names, and I don't feel too bad for it, but it's the fact that this cast was also so boring on top of it that if they had said their names more, I just don't think I would have registered it. And so when I say that even the kills aren't very interesting, some of them are quite ambiguous, like Belgrade Lady, because they feed her a little white Malteser of death. They say some ambiguous, spooky things. I really, nothing stuck in my brain for what they were saying to her. We don't even get a kind of close-up and exaggerated swallowing, which, I'm sorry, I sound like such a pervert in this video, but this is the thing. I think that Hellraiser, its major thing is that it's kinky, but they don't zoom in on that, they don't focus on that. She has her little white Malteser, and then it cuts away. And then we approach a scene with Riley and her boyfriend where they're having a shouting match. The neighbours must hate them because she's obsessing over the box. He's like, actually, I just got a call from the place they've just been, and the woman we were talking to has just disappeared without a trace. She's like, oh, wow, more mysteries. Let's go. We definitely have to investigate. That's weird. And he's like, let's not investigate. This will be interesting later. But she's been having a big undisclosed search engine about the guy that the woman mentioned, and has found his estate. She screams at him on the stairs, and he screams at her on the stairs, and then she drives off on her own to this big house that... Again, I want to like it. Too many things too early on in the movie turned me off in a way that I don't feel is fair. But I think I know why. It is just the jaded feelings that I get from just a cast that I don't care about, and there's nothing to make me care about them. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. She goes to this house. I am no longer praising the scenery that incorporates the puzzle box elements, because this mansion is just an intricate cuboid. It looks like it's got some Art Deco scaffolding over it, and I hated it. I really mean it when I tell you I wanted to like it, but I thought it just looked really rubbish and just way too jackhammer visuals. She taps around, breaks in through the kitchen, goes through this house at a really snail pace. I think that it's really interesting that I did then peruse a couple of other people's reviews just on Letterboxd, and some people seem to think the pacing was really good. Different strokes for different folks, you know? My opinion is not the opinion of all time, but I really don't understand it, because I actually just found it so slow. I don't think that there was any particular great tension built from it just being slow. It was just agonizing, and I really wanted to just sit and somehow put the movie on 2 times speed. Anyway, she finds a box with a bunch of switches. She flippin' loved those switches. There were a lot of them, to be fair. And so she plays with them and opens doors and windows and opens some doors and windows and opens some doors and windows and switches some lights. And that goes on for a fair few minutes, it feels like. She opens a balcony door, goes out, goes back in, and this is again all at a pace where it seems that the director is really convinced that there's tension being created through this. No, there's not. But this finally concludes when she hears her brother's voice. She ends up going down like a sick spiral staircase, and then he's there, and she's like, is it you? Is it really you? He's like, yeah, it's me. And then they do a little hug, but then she feels his back is sticky, and he's actually just mincemeat at the back. It was just a kind of illusion. And then all of his friends enter. So we now have the full cast here, ready for death. I did feel a bit sorry for the roommate girl, because she literally just tagged along and she ended up dying in the van in kind of a hallucination, and she had probably the most brutal death. We do, though, get to a point where a twist is revealed. The big cube house where Steve from Minecraft lives actually held the guy from the very start of the movie. Turns out that her boyfriend Trevor, he set the whole thing up because that guy told him to. The reason they went to the warehouse to get this puzzle box, that was because of him. And so, thinking back on it, a lot of his actions then did not make much sense. The box needed all of these sacrifices to be unlocked fully so that this guy could actually talk to the Cenobites and get his wish. I don't know. The mad thing as well is this movie focuses so much on exposition and lore dumping. Another thing that she finds in this house at some point is a big old diary journal thing with a bunch of cute charcoal fan art of Cenobite. I just don't really understand why there's such a focus on them, I think, because, right, here we go. In the OG movie, they don't really show up. It's mad because, of course, Pinhead as portrayed by Doug Bradley in 1987 is just so iconic. Like, he must be in Dead by Daylight by now. That's it. That's the mark of how iconic your horror villain is. Are they in Dead by Daylight yet? But definitely, he's iconic in any sense, you know, stands next to Freddy and Jason. But as I say, they're not really part of the OG movie. The real villain of the OG is Frank. This guy whose whole thing was that he was just so entitled to this idea that he deserved endless pleasure and that he would do anything to get that he is frightening. I did like a change from the book into the movie as well, where originally Kirsty, the protagonist, she just kind of fancies the main guy, and then everything in the book feels like convenience that she kind of made it out alive. She wasn't particularly likable in any way, but Frank and Julia, they were great antagonists. The Cenobites were just enablers to then the wicked and depraved things that they did to the people around them. But Hellraiser 2022, it thinks that all anybody should care about is the Cenobites, and it just makes it so disappointing. Like, our protagonist again, Riley, like, they started off, oh, she's a recovering drug addict, you know, that's something to attach to, but it just never really pops up again. As I say, the fact that she gets so obsessed with the box, there was like a parallel there of then like addiction, and that she has that addictive personality, and that is something that then pushes people who are close to her away from her again. But the whole thing, the reveal with Trevor, like, yeah, I did it for the money, I got you the box for the money that this guy was offering me. First of all, money? That is so weak. I hate that. What they did to my flippin' kinky, depraved BDSM Rubik's Cube. Because the thing that a lot of people have obviously picked up on as well is that the book came out around the time of the AIDS crisis, and so there was then a clear thing to say about the seeking of the greatest pleasure in a depraved way, but then also suffering the most pain imaginable. But they made her whole thing like, oh, the Cenobite said that maybe I can have my brother back. And then in the end, she does then reject that. So they trick this guy. I really don't remember. I feel like I really should remember. This is supposed to be the climactic end of the movie with the boyfriend and the roommate and the boyfriend's boyfriend. But it all just kind of zips by. But again, at this snail pace that I was just so bored. There's an army of flippin' Cenobites outside that, I do have to praise the designs. I'm very interested in the idea of a Hellraiser runway, fashion-wise. But, and I really regret that I was so bored at this point because it should have been so funny. There was one with no eyes and just like little munching teeths, mouth of Sauron. And he runs after them inside and gets stuck in a gate, which, I don't know, just goofy stuff. But when he's running after them as well, he's so oogly boogly about it. His arms are going all over the place. Ah! As I say, Riley, just, oh, no, because I've seen your gifts and what they do. And so the Cenobites are like, okay, Normie, and they drop the puzzle box in just its original configuration again, and then just leave her there. And she drives off with her boyfriend's boyfriend, who somehow survived despite getting a real nasty stab in the spine. It's a horror movie though, like I'm not actually like saying that's the worst thing about it, because it's really not. But we see that this guy, he was called like Roitvoit or something. I really don't remember. As I say, he appeared at the start of the movie, then appeared at the end to be like ho ho tee hee. And I really should have been interested and astonished at his whole thing at the end, because it's almost an after credits scene before an after credits scene where he is hoisted into the air and he's in a white void, and then he's being peeled apart like a cheese string and turned into a Cenobite himself. He ended up with the Leviathan configuration because, again, there was such a massive lore dump about the puzzle box and the Cenobites, and they've all got different configurations, and I'm like, do you get a Steam achievement ping when you unlock them all? But he's then turned into a Cenobite, and the thing is, the effects, I don't know if the effects were practical or CGI or anything, but it's why I, in a way as well, can't fully enjoy the Cenobites runway, because there's something so plasticky looking about them. I wanted to say rubbery, but I feel like rubber has more texture. They feel very just flat. And similarly, the gore effects, something that made Hellraiser so legendary, you know, when your man's mincemeat and crawling through the floors just as a big bloody blob. Where is that in Hellraiser 2022? It is just absolutely balmy to feel that this movie is so sanitized because of the complete lack of sensuality and the way that someone was ripped apart by chains and turned into beef chunks. But it just looked so unremarkable. It really is just such a disappointment to me that they just had such a flippin' focus on the Cenobites as being the main thing that people fucking care about, when really, the thing we should be fucking caring about is the fucking. That's what it should have been. As a point of fairness, this rendition of Hellraiser in particular was plagued with production issues from 2006. It took them 16 years of tossing this film around between different people like hot potato. And so maybe it's not fair to have expected better. But I really just don't fucking understand why you'd want to make a Hellraiser movie that doesn't actually address the BDSM points and that kinky nature and all of the things to do with the fact that pleasure-seeking and violence intermingle. Sexuality is so deeply linked to Clive Barker's work as a gay man, and he uses fiction to explore his history of sex work and sexual abuse. Like, I'm just haunted by that context, that it makes me then just feel that this movie, whilst also being the most criminal for being just so fucking boring, is also just offensive to then that exploration. It's nuts to me that this movie had sex scenes at all. It was so sanitized. It was so sexless. I just could not imagine any of the cast having genitals. Not that that's something I do on average, but again, I think I've hopefully explained why this was something on the mind as I went into a Hellraiser movie. Like, one of then the most striking and haunting scenes from the original movie was the sex scene between Frank and Julia. Frank, who I've explained if you don't know, is then just... Don't censor me, YouTube. He's just a rapey guy. He is just an aggressive bull of a rapey guy, and the fact that Julia is enamored by that. It was something that was definitely impactful reading the book and watching the movie, because that's such a rare thing to be displayed. And we could talk all day about how there's a lot of instances where it is displayed that it is then done in a problematic way. But then this is really just an intrinsic part of this movie. That it should be that horrible intersection that is shocking and confusing and grotesque between pain and pleasure. And the way that Julia helps Frank and still is sexually attracted to him, like, that's her motivation, is she wants to fuck him again, even as he's this blobby meat juice in the floor. And I just don't get any of that macabre, grotesque, confusing nature from the 2022 Hellraiser. Again, the being torn into chunks was just so clean. I think this is then maybe veering towards the unfair sides of criticism, where I do just have that hard-on for 80s movies and the practical effects and the way that they all just look so wet, and just there's that horrible texture to them that makes them so attractive for body horror that then you just don't see as much these days, because they'll just go all in on the CGI. And this isn't a hate against CGI either, but you get me. It can look very clean and, I don't know, PS2 cutscene textureless. But the thing about Hellraiser 1987 is that it also had this low budget nature to it that then gave it an extra griminess. I worry about then just sounding biased in a nostalgic way, even though I wouldn't be nostalgic for the 80s at my age. But I think there was even a strange charm to the production issues that the 1987 film had. There was a whole load of issues with dubbing and standards for its gore at the time, and there was something about the way that they dubbed it to make it more transatlantic friendly that you don't really know where the setting is in the end. I think it was originally supposed to be set in England, but they wanted to change that, as I say, to have more of a international appeal. And what I find about it is that actually it makes it quite uncanny and interesting to feel out of space and time. And another major change I really liked in the movie version, with Clive Barker so heavily on board, I really liked the change where Kirsty was made into Frank's niece, because I think that incestuous aspect is also another thing that goes into that shocking, horrible, grotesque, and it is Frank that is the villain, not the Cenobites. Like, they're just... in a way, it feels unfair to them to call them enablers. They're arbiters of their own religious order. One thing the reboot did at least take from the book, not that everything needs to be taken from the book for a good adaptation, but I did like that with the roommate's death, that she heard the bells. The bells is something that was mentioned a lot in the books, and I think that that sound aspect to it is something that is good to bring into, obviously, an audiovisual experience. Jamie Clayton then did do a fantastic job of a new Pinhead. It's another thing in the books that then, well, I would say people then are understandably very attached to Doug Bradley's performance as Pinhead in the original movie. And Jamie Clayton did a fantastic job. The book says they're actually all genderless, and so I do remember the inevitable kickback of, why is a woman playing Pinhead? But that is really not the thing to have focused on in this movie in terms of bad choices. But I think that she was fantastic. I think she did a really good job of then a good intimidating walk, good tone of voice, and otherworldliness. I thought that she was grand. The scene at the end when Roland Voight is hoisted up into the air, when then her pinhead says something along the lines of, "Oh, you would like another gift?" Like, I can't actually mimic that because it was very good. And very nice as well, actually, that these Cenobites had such generous return policies. Again, you know, why were they made to be the main villains? I think they're alright. I think another aspect, though, that I really liked from the book and the first movie is that there is woven in message about consent with the puzzle box. People aren't then tricked into using it when it's not used as a weapon with its daggers, because that's the major thing about Hellraiser 2022 as well, with the kills and how the box takes their blood. It's all just someone's clumsy and cuts themselves on a sharp edge of it. I like the question of consent being brought into it in the originals because, as I say, again, it intermingles with the messages that come about through talking about sex and rape and that grotesque nature that comes with it. When Kirsty solves the puzzle box in the original, when the Cenobites are called forth, they give her a choice. They question her because they realise that they haven't been intentionally called. They're not interested, really, in people who don't seek out what their order provides, what their order's mission is. I think taking away this consent element and then not even fully engage with the addiction themes that they brought in with Riley. So boring. I hear they may be doing a sequel to this as well, so let's see what they think they've made to branch off of. For Hellraiser 2022, 1.5 pins to stick in my own head so I can try and keep myself awake. And for 1987, 4 lament configurations. For tomorrow, another Clive Barker venture, Candyman 1992, based on Forbidden from Books of Blood.